If you are not currently a subscriber, you can sign up for a subscription today by going to sinisterwisdom.org/subscribe. We're putting that link into the chat. I hope you will find ways to support the work of Sinister Wisdom. You can become a Sinister Wisdom sustainer with a monthly gift at sinisterwisdom.org/sustainers. Thank you all for joining us. Looks like we have over 102 people now. Please feel free to put comments in the chat throughout. You can share where you are as you tune in and say hi to friends in the chat. Before we begin this evening, I have a few housekeeping notes. First, keep your microphone muted throughout the program. If we detect noise from you, we will mute you. As the program proceeds, if you want to show appreciation for Minnie Bruce, wave your hands and use the reactions emojis on Zoom. You can go ahead and test that out now. Please light up that chat room on Zoom and put comments on Facebook. If you need technical assistance this evening, you can chat with Juno Stilley or Casey Moore, who are technical gurus for the evening. We are recording the event this evening and will make it available starting tomorrow or Thursday at sinisterwisdom.org/SW119. That's in the chat too. We have an amazingly special evening tonight with Minnie Bruce Pratt celebrating her new book, Magnified. Minnie Bruce Pratt has a long history with Sinister Wisdom. We could not be more pleased to have her with us this evening celebrating her new book, Magnified. Her first poem in Sinister Wisdom appeared in Volume 5 in 1978. She then had poems in Volumes 6 and 7, and poems from her collection, When We Say We Love Each Other, appeared in Sinister Wisdom 24 and 27. Sinister Wisdom reviewed Minnie Bruce's co-authored book, Yours in Struggle, written with Barbara Smith and Ellie Bulkin in volumes 29 and 30. More of her poems from Crime Against Nature appeared in Sinister Wisdom 35, 37, and 65. In 2010, Sinister Wisdom reissued Crime Against Nature as our first Sapphic classic. In Sinister Wisdom 112, we published 3 new poems by Pratt, including some that appear in this new collection, Magnified. We could not be more excited to share in this celebration of Magnified, Pratt's 9th book of poetry. In addition to poetry, Pratt is the author of creative nonfiction and political theory. Originally from Alabama, Pratt has long roots in the U.S. South and was part of a vibrant lesbian and feminist organizations like Woman Rights and Feminary. Today, Pratt continues to write, organize, and advocate for working and oppressed people. She is a managing editor of Workers' World Mundo Obrero newspaper. This evening, Pratt will read from Magnified, a collection of love poems, including poems about her beloved Leslie Feinberg. Minnie Bruce will read for about 25 minutes and then be in conversation with Sinister Wisdom editor and publisher Julie Enszer. Please join me in welcoming Minnie Bruce Pratt.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much, Rose. It's very moving for me to be here tonight with everyone. Family, old and new friends, comrades in the struggle from many, many years. Especially meaningful to be here as part of Sinister Wisdom. Rose has spoken quite accurately of my long connection, deeper and more detailed even than there's room to talk about here. I can say that the first poetry reading that I ever did was in Charlotte, North Carolina. Ever did as an out lesbian, was in Charlotte, North Carolina at the behest of Harriet and Catherine, who were editors of Sinister Wisdom at the time. And I was so frightened at being out and reading in front of other people that I had to hold on to the podium. My knees were shaking so hard. That was 1979. It's a very different moment to be with you here, all of us together we have made this space, and it makes me really, really happy to be here with you. These poems are in memoriam for my beloved Leslie Feinberg, brilliant, beloved revolutionary. We were together 22 years, and I began writing these poems toward the end of that when Leslie was quite sick. And I'll talk some more about this when Julie and I talk. Right now, I'm just going to read poems for a while. So this is it. The picture from Niagara Falls that Leslie took on the cover. This is the very first poem. I wrote it in 2007. Oh, death. Someone sang, oh, death. Oh, death, won't you pass me over for another day? Someone said, I dreamed of you last night. I dreamed you were telling me your whole life story. Whole world, welkin, winkle, wrinkle. The loop of time holds us all together. The pile of laundry on the bed, you folding socks one inside the other. We have had this day and now this night. The clothes are put away, and from the bed we see the moon folding light into darkness, not death. Blue moon. The trees creak overhead, squeaky doors pushed forth and back in the wind. On the porch, we watch the moon rising from whisper to guess, to peach, white, then blue. Once in a blue moon, a love like this comes along. We weren't standing alone. Lots of people, a room vast with politics, and that ex-lover playing Catch My Eye. You read us a story, the one who had been you, a past, the one who had been me, your torn shirt, my needle's eye. We had been alone. We had read what the other had asked. The light shone on the pages, your face up tilted in the glare. Glory, mirror, future. Later, I knew you were looking up at me. I knew you. You knew me. We looked at each other, shining on each other, shining on sun, sailing on moon. The Great Swamp. That spring, you and I leaned over the edge, staring into the swamp. What was in there? Amphibian eyes glinting like treasure in the water, gold dots of pollen flecking a sodden carpet. That spring, we saw you were beginning to die. The arrowhead leaves flew slowly up green out of the murky water. You got sick and sicker. We leaned. Our shadows reached into the water. We looked down into the mud, past where we'd seen, to what could be lived, waiting to come. Hourglass. All night the wind throws sleet against the glass like the sand stinging our faces and hands the day the hurricanes pale end lashed us at the beach. Time tumbles us back and forth in its giant hourglass. One night at the beginning, you stood naked in the hall. It was storming outside the window, lightning, hail. You flicker into light, arriving before me once again. Time rattles at our window, time trying to get in. No time to be afraid. Got no time to be afraid, says the balancing waitress, bacon and eggs in 4 plates. We're eating breakfast at the diner. You are talking and I begin this poem. You are sicker, more tests, say the doctors. Nothing to hold between me and your death but some words. As long as I carry words around and write them down, you won't die. As long as I write and write, the words will still fall over us like a snow shower in May, the day we sat in the car at Schiller Park and watched the wind blow snowflakes like dandelion fluff onto new green grass. The spin, the dip. I don't want life with you to end, so I say, we never took those dance lessons, the spin, the dip. There'll always be something not yet done, one more trip to see the falls fall. I dreamed you said, let's go over together. And I said, but I would die, not you. Not you dying in the dream, not you. We had the talk about ashes, named the North and South rivers to be sprinkled with us like pollen, specks to meet again in some thundercloud. Our boom, zigzag, bloom. Can we go see the falls? You will smile at me in the thunder and I will not yet be pouring you through my hands, chalky bone dust disappearing into the mist, eternal, beautiful, disembodied matter. Not yet, not you. The tornado. You and I saw the storm coming up the valley. It made a precipice, and from there it fell on us. At the storm edge, a couplet of wind fragments side by side, inbound and outbound velocities, tried to clasp each other. Then a whirl into oblivion, the only evidence of existence, a cloud of debris. Beauty into nothingness. You say, let's step back from the window. You clasp my hand. What will be left of us? Bits of sound and matter, exhorting voices inside the whirlwind, saying the end is not destruction, saying two is not the answer, saying revolution is bigger than both of us. Revolution is a science that infers the future presence of us. The moon, reading. The moon looks in our bedroom window at us sometimes. As I lie down beside you, she pulls a silvery sheet over us and then retreats to her silent nighttime reading, east to west. Night after night, That bright gaze moves over us, lying under the comfort of being watched over. The round illuminated magnifying glass in Mama's hands as she passed into dementia and understood less and less, her anxious eyes reading the same line over and over. The moon that shone in my window when I was little and supposed to have religion, as I knelt and prayed to that light because she looked back at me. Everything earthly and imperfect changes under the moon. In this moment, beside you, I am perfectly happy, lying in the moon's light, drifting slowly with you into illegible sleep. The Peacock Fan. Another day comes, son, you can walk to the car. At the zoo, we watch a peacock unfurl its spiny prismatic fan, the quiver of feathers, the quill work, the vibration faster than any hand could fan desire. I say, remember the feather fan you gave me? I folded and opened the veins to peer over at the stern, handsome face you wait behind. You watch the world come at you, toward you, then you give another look that's just for me. The glint, the sun striking the peacock blue. The peacock ore I saw behind museum glass, the copper iron sulfide rock burning at high temperatures, volcanic, igneous iridescence. Light responding to the surface of a substance, responding to light. Your wavelength, my wave. Do not seek to remain. I am reading Marx in the Eastwood McDonald's. Fleetwood Mac is singing. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Marx is saying, do not seek to remain something formed by the past, but in the absolute moment of becoming. The words are ripping up the moment, and I fall into a tomorrow without you. No morning, no light, no night, no sleeping, no waking, no dawn on your shoulder, talking about what is the present. How do I go on? The way yesterday a tree shook its small crescents of seed, angled for planting, sickled for reaping, red in the blue sky. The answer in things, not words. But I yearn to talk to you without end about what makes that beauty and what that beauty makes of us. Turning the switch off. Habit, the key in the ignition, and no, maybe never thought about why, what happens next. Turn down and onto Almond Street, sun into shadow, under the overpass, then the red light and sun gnawing at my ear. The comfort of habit, not psychological. The pileated cackle every year in the old magnolia, rejoicing the chambered seed cone has opened, the plump lick. What habit gives us, and when it fails. Deshabi says there were two seasons, wet and dry, The farmers knew time out of time when to plant until now. The drought, the weather has changed its habit, or something else has changed the mind of the climate. We were watching Norma Ray yesterday, holding hands. The mill hands reached out and turned each switch off. How hard to break the habit of work, obedience not to machines, but to those who own them. The hand reaching out to take its own, bringing the fragment, the red seed, delicious to the mouth. The use of words. What's the use of words drop between us and the other? Hawksweed, flower, yellow, yellow, caution, warning, camera, security, eye. They are watching us. I might call out for Harriet Tubman, someone else, the justice system. Injustice depends on who the us is, and the other depends. From every word hangs a warning. The wind-snapped, blood-stained banner of history. The relation between words and people. Locked inside, the maintenance guy says. Squirrels destroyed 8-10 windows trying to get out. I walk around the school in the gray, up to the grand facade of learning, like a real estate photo, slick until I get up close. Then borders run to dandelions, clover, mustard, and pasture grass, and the hawk that lives on the tower roof whimpers and mews and dives through the awards party, the punch cups, the cupcakes. She flies into a tree with claw empty and tongue still outraged, the poem as prey, as blood luscious, elusive, the poem as the locked room. The history of the world. Of course we wonder about our dreams, how they come from, what they mean. Last night I worked in a warehouse at a printing press, and in the day room at break, the woman across smiled and said, "I'm a communist." Outside there was a huge shouting, one word, then another. In between, a silent intake of breath, the moment between waves when the ocean draws back to smash forward again. The sound was outside me and inside me, and I was glad. Earlier, I walked on Hawley Street past a green lot, vacant. Its one tree cut down, the trunk piled in pieces, the mutilated branches sprouting leaves like fingers spreading even in death. I woke and told you the dream, and you said, the history, when the history of the world is written, and you meant by us, the woman, the ocean, you, me, that us. Sleeve. I lie in the dark, listening to a pulse of sound, letters in an unknown alphabet, spelling out words that come and go through a sorrowful labyrinth. And out of the corner of my eye, I glimpse you passing down the dim lit hallway, the edge of you, your sleeve, perhaps. Devouring time. The garden plot grubbed down to dirt since yesterday. A blankness where there was what? I can't remember. There might have been plants, amaranth to zinnia, erased. A half-eaten tomato on the bench like a torn and bitten four-chambered heart. Devouring time, I am not done yet. Not yet. I'm writing down what you are doing to us. And then I'm going to read two more poems in this segment, and then at the very end of the evening, I'll read one last poem. Just these two for right now. In the end, what is left to say? In the end, you died, and with your last mouthful of breath, you carried away the person you had been. You took away the person I was with you. At the end, you said, this time I know I am going and you are staying. But someone unknown to me was the one who survived, saying, if only we were still alive. The ledge. Wind drags the voices of the dead howling over the metal window ledge. The harmonica of what's left unsaid. What's the use of poetry? Not one word comes back to talk me out of pain. I go out to hear the music and there is nothing until almost the end. Then the giant drumming feet as night escapes in cool flight, and then the blaze, the brass, the sun comes back. The only eye stares back into mine. A voice, mine, is saying, I stayed to the very end, the very end. That I remember.
Wow, thank you so much, Minnie Bruce. I'm giving space for the thunderous applause, right, that we experience in different kinds of ways in our Zoom world. But that was really an extraordinary reading, and it was especially delightful for me because I've read a couple of the poems earlier, but I've not read the full collection, and I'm very much looking forward to that. For folks who are just joining us, I know we've had lots of people coming in over the past 10 or 15 minutes. You are at Sinister Wisdom's gathering to celebrate the publication of Magnified by the wonderful Minnie Bruce Pratt, who you just heard give a beautiful reading of poems from this extraordinary collection. Magnified is published by Wesleyan University Press. And if you order a copy from Karis Books and More, the link is in the chat and people might lift it up and amplify it a bit while we talk. You will receive a signed copy. So I encourage folks to support Caris, the independent feminist bookstore. They've done so much to nurture our communities, to nurture Minnie Bruce Pratt's career, sold so many copies of her books over the years. And I hope we can support them. So Minnie Bruce, thank you so much for that reading. I hope you're just basking a bit in having the book out in the world, because certainly no book ever feels guaranteed, I think, until it's sitting in your hands. I have a couple questions of things that we might talk about, and I was adding notes as you're reading. And but first I want to just give, and then I was going someplace with that, and then I'll take questions from the audience. So if people have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will get to those, or you can raise your hand, and we'll have questions a little bit before Minnie Bruce reads the final poem of the evening. So it seems to me that this book, Magnified, like so much of your work, captures the intimacy of relationships. And that was something that I think that drew me to your work as a young reader. I first read you when I was 18. And you know, it was that sort of intimacy of relationships that that resonated so much in the poem as I was struggling to come out. And here I think you have the intimacy of relationships in another profoundly vulnerable moment of sickness and death. And so I just wanted to invite you to open this discussion by reflecting for us all a bit on your life with Leslie and how it shaped putting this book together.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh, Julie, I just love the thought of you reading me when you were 18. And really that opens to, I thought about this a bit before, you know, because you gave me a notion that you might ask in this framework. And it opens to what I did want to say, which is that, you know, Leslie and I came together in our mid 40s. We had both lived in the movement, lived as queer people, you know, for quite a long time. And certainly I had been shaped by the space that Sinister Wisdom made. For instance, I remember Harriet and Catherine saying to me and others that people had written to them saying they were writing things that they would never have written before because there was nowhere to take that work to until there was a place that said we want lesbian work. And so I think that statement reflects on both queer life, what has happened between 1975 when I came out and now, how we within a whole spectrum of left movements have just kept making new spaces. And that means we get to be people that we wouldn't have been otherwise, because we wouldn't have had anywhere to take that person, anywhere to be that person. And that's certainly been true in my life. All the editors that, you know, have edited Sinister Wisdom, from Harriet and Catherine, Michelle and Adrienne, all the different guest editors like Rose, you know, every one of them made a new space to be in. And I've written about how that's a struggle to make that space. I mean, when I lost custody of my children, I had to say to myself, I'm not going to be a tragedy. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to be part of making a new world. And when I met Leslie, that was an expansion of what I understood a new world could be like. Leslie had, you know, a materialist analysis that I hadn't really deepened in myself, and also an understanding of sexuality and gender in a much more complex way. Although we were working toward that in the specifically lesbian community. And those of you who lived through the sex wars know what I'm talking about. I won't even go there right now. That would take all evening. But we were trying to get to a much more expansive understanding of what human sexuality and gender was. So my life with Leslie just was wonderfully and beautifully complicated by all these new learnings that I was doing. And it was very hard in certain ways because there was so much still anti-lesbian stuff, but not just that. We were living across those categories. And Leslie was very sick. She was sick when we got together in ways that we didn't understand because it was Lyme plus, and there was just no knowledge of it. And medical care is so deeply anti-trans. And again, the stories that I could tell you just of what happened when we were together, not from before I knew Leslie. I tell people those stories and they say, how could that happen? Well, it happens every day to oppressed people. It happens to people of color. It happens to disabled people. It happens to trans people. They get denied medical care because of who they are and thrown out of the waiting room, or the emergency room or whatever. So it's a commonplace to say, but as we went through illness together, then that led me into an even deeper understanding of what it means to be a human being, to really understand that people face death all the time and bigotry all the time. And I think that there are many people living, and we've seen examples of it in the past 4 years, who have no understanding of their own human vulnerability because they live lives of such privilege and distance. But most of us don't lead those lives. We don't. And so part of what the poems came out of was my really grappling with what it means to come close to death and to keep going. And that's what Leslie and I did. We worked all the time she was sick. When she couldn't write, she made photographs. She would write articles and I would edit them. She wrote, a whole series on queer socialism, in weekly installments, and when she could hardly lift her head. And I finished with Julie bringing back Crime Against Nature when we thought Leslie was dying. She came back for a while. We just worked all the time. We worked all the time. We loved all the time. I kept writing the poems.
Mm-hmm. And someone asked that question about your creative process and grief. Was there a period after Leslie died? Did you write immediately after she died? Was there a more quiet period? Did it take time to come back to writing, or was it really a through line for you in that process?
All the poems in the book, except one, I wrote before she died.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe two, but hardly anything that's in the book. I revised, but there was quite a long time where I didn't do anything but grieve and work at my job, and that's what I did. And then I've written other things, but not these poems. Since she died, there are other things that have come out, poems, that's a whole other story, like what it means, you know, to write after she is gone, because we, you know, we didn't just work all the time. We talked about our work with each other, and we read each other's work all the time, and we went through proofing each other's work. And, you know, so doing a book without her was very hard. It was hard. You know, there's a lot there to talk about.
Yeah. One of the things that really struck me hearing the poems this evening, and after looking at some of your other work over the weekend, is how vibrantly your poems are connected to moving about in the world. Both moving about politically, and, you know, when you talk about you and Leslie working so intensively together, and loving together, and that I think of that as movement in the world as well. But also walking figures in so many of your poems, right? Both walking in urban environs and in more natural or rural environs. And also I think of that moving about in the world as also as being an activist, that you're sort of deeply interested in how people move through the world, how other people are moving through the world, and how you're observing them, and how you're observing nature. And so I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you bring the world and your observations into the poem, a little bit about your, you know, if you'd open up a little bit of what's it like to be at your writing desk with all of this happening, or are you writing them all in your
See,
mind?
I didn't
as you-
write any of these at a desk. I don't think a single one. I have to go back and look. But so there's a lot of walking in my work. You know, one of my books is called Walking Back Up Depot Street, right? I think I'm a country person. I did a lot of walking in my life. But it's more, you know, it's more than that. It's more than that. I keep looking for people who are looking at me. I keep looking in the corner because I see Julie's face up here. I'm going to try not to do that. I'm just going to try and look at everybody. With these poems, they literally were walking poems, because they started in 2007. Leslie was getting much sicker. She was still up and about and working, but not out in the world very much. I would be with her when I wasn't at my job, and but I would take walking breaks in the morning. Often I would go out and I would walk, and I don't remember making a conscious decision about this, but I decided somehow that when I went out to walk, I would just try to find a piece of a poem. And that might be an image or it might be a line, but it was something to connect me to the world and to what was going on in the world, sometimes in a bigger way, as you said, Julie, you know, and sometimes in just a very small way, or a more immediate way. And I would walk and I would get my image, and then I would get a line, and then I would get more of a poem. And then sometimes I would just sit somewhere or stand. I had a notebook with me all the time, and just write down what I had so I didn't lose it. Or maybe I'd come back into the building and sit in the foyer and write it down, or even come up to the apartment and sit and write it down. And then I had a draft, and then I didn't look at it for months or maybe years. I just had it. So what happened after Leslie died is that eventually I was able to go back to really scores and scores and scores of poems. Like I have hundreds of pages that I, you know, didn't use. But they came out of that just being out in the world and trying to see what the connection was between me and the world. And this was not a, you know, this is not an abstract process. I'd always felt about my work that I was satisfied if my work could go out into the world. When my name was forgotten, when even the names of the books were forgotten, if my political work went out into the world and the poems went out into the world, they became part of a stream of life resistance that would go on forever. And that was enough for me.
Mhm.
But when Leslie got so sick, and we really came so close to death many times, both because of, transphobia and the chance that she could die from a beating, but then from the illness, it really called into question what I was doing with the poems. So those questions are serious in there. I say, what's the worth of it? What's the good of it?
Mhm.
And that's how I felt.
Mhm.
But I still had to keep writing, because even though death was so close and then it was upon us, because I really do know that words and actions matter. It's not a religious belief. It's not a metaphysical belief. It comes right out of dialectical materialism. We are always making the future in the present with what we say and what we do. And collectively, when we do that, we can come to another world. We can make another world. And we have. We have made new worlds.
Mhm.
And so the poems, the walking around was really the being out and breaking the isolation of the individual, even though I wasn't writing with other people most of the time. It was being with the world and asserting that the poems were part of that.
It's beautiful. Yeah. And that I think also ties in, we started doing these Zoom gatherings in a similar sort of moment of grief and isolation, and with the global COVID pandemic. And I wonder how has the past year been for you, as another year of a type of isolation, and in it, how have you been finding ways to keep what's so obvious, that your revolutionary spirit, your commitment to language, to change, to being in the world, endures through these experiences? Do you have words for us of how you're able to do that?
Well, when people ask me about, how are you doing during the pandemic, sometimes I say to them, well, I was an only child. I'm a poet, and I'm a lesbian who came out in 1975. So I'm really used to being alone. I'm really used to being by myself and excluded often, right, in terms of my sexuality. Like all those things that people write about, the family stuff, I was separated from my children for 10 years. I saw them, but believe me, Christmas was not a big holiday for me. So there's that answer. I've been toughened for this moment in my life. And I have a lot of resources to fall back on. Fortunately, I have political work that can be done, editing the newspaper. I hope people do take a look at Workers' World. We cover the struggles, and there's nothing like a weekly deadline to keep you busy. Either you're writing, you're editing, or you're doing the flow of work that makes a weekly newspaper come out. It's a great thing to help you keep going. And it helps, it builds the movement. It's one way to build the movement for another world, for a better world. So there's that. I have to say, putting my poetry up on Facebook has really helped me, because one of the things that happened, I came out of a political movement as a poet. We would have big readings and they wouldn't be like just the poets, right? It was like the whole community. I remember reading at the Oddfellows Hall in Jacksonville, Florida, I think. You know, it was the first time there had been a big lesbian community meeting, 1981.
Mhm.
People were so frightened to be with each other in public. Oh, it was a great, great moment. Well, putting my work up on Facebook has been like that. You know, people write and say things like, I had trouble getting up this morning, and then I read the poem and I could get up and keep going. And that to me, when I think about how I've gotten back to my own poetry during this time, you know, poetry isn't political action. It isn't. It's not the kinds of structural work that has to be done to build the new entities we need. But what I do know is poetry helps us stay alive. It helps us stay alive, even when we've, like I have often felt since Leslie died, I have felt like I wanted to die. Not that I was going to take my life, just that I didn't see how I would go on. Poetry helps me stay alive. It helps other people stay alive. I think it helps people remember why we're trying to make a better world, especially when, you know, so many of us are the people who are targeted. The people of color, the disabled people, the queer people, the trans people, you know, the poor people. These poems to me are really about that helping keep us alive, not for some abstract political position. No, because the world is beautiful and we are precious and we have so much creativity and possibility that is being trampled on every day. What might our world be if we could bring our dreams into reality? What might it be? So that's the hope. You know, I've been singing during this reading. Well, we sing about another world is possible, right? We sing, arise, ye prisoners of starvation, arise, ye wretched of the earth, for justice thunders condemnation, a better world's in birth. Well, that is not pie in the sky. It is not. It is like, okay, we got to make it, we got to build it. But as we build it, right, we have to know love and loss and joy and what it feels like to stand and look at the dew in the tulip's eye and just know that it's worth fighting for, that it's worth fighting for. Poetry can bring that to us.
That's so beautiful. I think you exactly answered a question that Jess posed with those last comments. Jess asked, what's the relationship between erotic, longing, grief, and the aliveness of generating a new world? And I think you spoke beautifully to that. We have one final question, and then we'll have you, I'm going to have you talk about the final question, then I'm going to do a little Sinister Wisdom advertisement, then we'll have you read the final poem and do our dance party. And the question is, you commented, we are always making the future in the present. And Evan Boland speaks eloquently about the past being different than history. As a history maker, Sandy asks, how do you reconcile the past and history as an activist writer?
Well, you know, Lillian Smith says the winner names the age. So what is history? The history that we're taught within the structures of power is not the history, as Leslie said to me, when the history of the world is written by us, meaning the woman, the ocean, you and me, and all the people who've been left out of the history books. You know, that's a different history. History is not an objective moment. It is as lived by many different groups of people who have had different struggles and therefore different experiences and therefore different wisdom from those and different stories. So every liberation movement that I've been part of and that I think has ever existed has had to dig up the buried history. I certainly had to do it in my life. Boy, talk about being brainwashed by segregation. I didn't know anything. I was just a totally ignorant person when I got through my college education. So, the past is the past lived by us. History, that we have to challenge and figure out how to bring it, bring our lives into it. Be those who make it, not those that are done to.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for speaking with me tonight, for joining us, for reading your poems. I'm going to do the quick commercial for folks tuned in here, which is, first of all, we did record this, and a video of this will be available at the Sinister Wisdom website tomorrow or Thursday. I'll put the link in the chat during the final song. Next week on Tuesday night, we have a hot talk between Cheryl Clark and Shakira Rifos on lesbian and or queer in Blackness is their topic. I encourage you, Sinister Wisdom 120, we just did the cover reveal of it. It is out in the mail. Give it a good 4 to 5 weeks before it reaches you. Crime Against Nature was the first Sapphic classic published by Sinister Wisdom and is available for ordering on our website or through bookstores near you. Our 120 launch reading on Asian lesbians will be on Tuesday, April 20th. I hope that you'll join us for that. What's going to happen now is Minnie Bruce is going to read a final poem. Casey is going to cue up our dance song, The L Word by Yer Girlfriend. When Minnie Bruce is done, you'll hear the song. We'll put everybody on gallery view. You can listen to the music, stand up, dance. We will highlight videos. And when the music ends, sadly, our time together for now ends, but we look forward to seeing you again in the future. I want to extend a really heartfelt thanks before you read the final poem, Minnie Bruce, to you for agreeing to do this, for all of the wonderful things that you've done for Sinister Wisdom and for me and for your beautiful work that I just cherish in the world.
Thank you so much, Julie. And I just have one request. I don't know if you can meet it or not. People are leaving wonderful, interesting things in the chat, and I haven't had a moment, of course, to look at any of it. So if there's a way to
we will
save it for me,
we will download the full chat. I will email it to you tomorrow morning, and you'll be able to see everything everyone has said and be able to enjoy all of their comments. So people should add in comments and know that Minnie Bruce will see them and receive them with the love that you're sending out.
I just want to say again, so many thanks to Julie and to Rose, but also just to say, I'm so sorry I can't talk to everybody at a party where we were all together. I would be wandering around now, visiting with everybody and catching up and hearing how you are and getting hugs. And I'm sorry that part of it we can't have. On the other hand, we're all here together, and we wouldn't be if I were giving a party in Syracuse for this book. So counting my blessings right now, really counting them. You all are included in those. And here's the last poem. This is one of the 2 poems that I wrote after Leslie died. The foreword. How we have to go over and over things, repeat beaten path, repeat to bury or uncover. The same story told to the same person again, again, again. Yet Another of these poems about death. Yes, again, survival by repetition, the effort behind the smell of cut grass, the swing back, the push, the crisscross of dying blades. You and me lying down on the grass after that long, hot march, hand in hand on the cool ground, and then pain, our muscles seized to the bone. We almost can't get up, but we do. Pain and the body's memory, the going on of all the other marches, the forward. Thank you all for being here tonight together.
Casey, if you would turn up your volume a little bit, that would be great.
Word. It's the only chance you got to reclaim our name and not live in shame to try to improve our lives. Word. It's the only chance you got to stop the lying and denying and come on and give it a shot. And everybody say lesbian. Everybody say lesbian. Everybody say lesbian. Said the L word. Did your stomach take a turn? Did you look around to see if the sound is loud enough to make the ears burn? Did you say it in a whisper? Or did you just say gay? Did your face turn red? Did you decide instead to save it for another day? Then do yourself say lesbian. Everybody say lesbian. Everybody say lesbian.
We know there are risks involved. No oppressed group has ever gained their freedom without risk. And no oppressed group has ever gained their freedom without a physical movement. So right here, in broad daylight on the courthouse steps, we want to take this day to announce the official launching of the Fairness Campaign, to work toward fairness and justice for lesbians and gays, and to see that fairness is present in city
Do you
law.
think it sounds like a rare disease, a perversion, a plague, a vice? All it takes is a little practice. But come on and take my advice, and everybody say lesbian.
Lesbian.
Say lesbian. 'Cause if you can't say it, it's hard to be it. If you can't be it, they can't see it. If they can't see it, they'll deny it. If we all deny it, we're in the closet for life. For life. Or death. Silent people can't go.
Increase years, start of the age crisis. Still we are losing our jobs. We are denied places to live. We are here today to say enough is enough. We are ready to live as full and equal members of society. And we are ready to fight for our freedom.
Give me an eye.
Maybe we have to make sounds though.
Everybody say lesbian. Come on, say lesbian. Everybody say lesbian.
Lesbian. Oh, goodness.
This is a significant time in our community and
or the wise one that's helping you through. Think of your high school basketball coach and your last music festival crush, or your ultimate erotic fantasy. It's okay to blush. Find a mirror, look yourself in the eye, and with warm regard, say the L word, say lesbian. Everybody say lesbian. Come on, say lesbian. Everybody say lesbian. Everyone say lesbian.
Love you all. Love you all.
Come on, say lesbian.